Hey, it's Timothy. Glad to be with you. You know, we've been covering some areas about what makes us hurt when we don't really know what's going on with really what's taking place in our life, something from our past. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. And so Proverbs, we find in 18:21, talks about that death and life are in the power of the tongue. And so as we get into this area, I just want you to understand that it's important to realize how important your words are. We're cleansed by the Word of God. God created the universe with words. Words is what we communicate with every day. You can't live without communicating. You got to be able to communicate somehow or another. But understanding that sometimes your words can create a very painful experience for someone, especially children. Now, a lot of times with children, you don't know that they're experiencing pain in the form of experiencing it, but they can. And one of the areas that children experience it in is rejection. Now, most people have a certain amount of rejection in their life. They come in through life and you have rejection, and nobody likes rejection. All of us, to a certain point, like to be accepted. Now, we can say we don't care anymore, but on the other hand, you let somebody start rejecting you, and you'll find really quick that you'll start saying, hey, I don't know if I like that person or not. Hey, there's Josh. Oh, Josh, good to see you. I am glad to see anybody that's listening tonight. I appreciate her today. Thank you very much. And so rejection then is based on, like if you have children and they come home and they get showing you their report card, and the mom says or the dad says, did anybody make A's? You made B's. And you say, did anybody here make A's? And then the mom or dad will say, well, you should have been able to make an A. In other words, what you've done without realizing it is you're creating a rejection. Now, I'm not trying to say that you should all be equal in the basis of what we're doing, because that goes back to Sigmund Freud's ego or innate and ego. And so superego from Sigmund Freud was, he believed that society put up a set of standards, and that's what was causing the problem in life, is that people are trying to make you live to a certain standard. Okay. And there's an element of truth to that, but that's the reason today that you see 100 years later, they're still trying to live by some, I won't say crazy thought process, whatever, but they're still trying to go by something that somebody 100 years ago come up and said, okay, well, that's imposing pressure on our society, and so children should be able to go to school and not make grades. We've seen how that worked out in the last number of years, okay? Let's just give little Johnny an A, regardless if he made an A or not. And what it does is it deters people from trying to improve themselves and do better. That's why people work, is so that they can improve themselves to be able to do better job, better living. And so rejection, though, can set in. It's just the way you handle it. You can handle the situation without just coming right out rejection, because people who've had rejection in their life, I would be counseling. I'd sit down and, obviously, I'm, a Christian psychologist at that point when I was doing pastoral counseling. By no means, I have no MD doctorate degree. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm nothing down those paths, but just studying the areas of Christian psychology and secular psychology to be able to counsel, is that someone would come in and, if you go to a psychiatrist, which is an MD with another 2 years, and then he does his intern or she does her internship somewhere else and, some prestigious hospital somewhere, and then, they get really good at what they're doing and make a lot of money. Okay, so... and they enjoy working on the brain and the thought process, except the problem has been is that they really have not been able to any great length of being able to help someone. It goes back to World War II when they had shell shock. They come in, the soldiers were so wounded, seen such carnage, seen such pain, experienced such pain, and just the horrid experiences that they experienced would cause them to go into this lockdown to where they couldn't even function. Well, they realized at that point, if you're full of bananas, they need to just put apples in you. So they take the guy out and have him sweep the floor or do whatever, have him start to doing something to start replacing that inner thoughts to get them through that process. And that's why sometimes when people are in extreme pain, they'll go out and work or they'll go out and do something because they're occupying that and replacing that thought process with that. So rejection, though, causes you to either do two things. One is you attempt to be a perfectionist, or you rebel, one or the other. That's the only way. And you're doing that for self-preservation. You're doing that to try to preserve yourself. And so, Brandy, good to see you. And then Terry Moody, good to see you. And then John Webb, good to see you. I'm glad to see everyone tonight. So, you end up then trying to be a perfectionist. A perfectionist is trying to. The reason that they become a perfectionist is that that's their way of feeling good about themselves. And then pretty soon it becomes a lifestyle. In other words, they can't go to bed at night because they haven't done their soup, alphabetized their soup, okay? And it's okay to alphabetize your soup as long as it's not driving. If you can't sleep at night because your soup's not in order, okay, you might have an issue. Or if your husband gets up and goes to the bathroom, you make the bed while he's gone, then you might have an issue. These are jokes along those lines. And so a perfectionist then is always trying to be perfect, and that's perfectionists. They're trying to make things perfect, and they don't feel good about themselves unless something is perfect. And I got news for you. This world is a very imperfect place to live. It's a very hard place to live, and trying to live into perfection can be very hazardous to your mental health. And I'm not saying go to the other extreme, and the other extreme is that a person becomes rebellious. And that's why you see, and the only reason they do that is for their mental to survive in those areas, they'll reach over and become rebellious. Now, that doesn't cover every area. There's exceptions to everything. These are the general rules that I'm talking about that people fit within these areas of boxes. And believe it or not, we fit in those boxes sometimes, because sometimes people will, if they were told they were stupid as a child, or they couldn't, you're never going to amount to anything, then the rest of their life they'll be trying to prove how smart they are, how bright they are. Any chance they'll get, they'll prove how smart or bright they are. And then if they go the route of the rebellious, they just don't care, okay? They just listen, I don't care about anything. And then and it's hard to have a good relationship. Hi, Meyer, good to see you. And there's my sister, Charlene from Speedwell, Tennessee, who I'd love to see, okay? And so they'll go the extra mile to, trying to be accepted into those areas. And so that's rebellion. Rebellion is, I just don't care. I don't care what anybody thinks about me. But still deep down inside, they're looking for the acceptance. And the reason that people want acceptance is it makes you feel better about yourself. And so when people accept you, it makes you feel good. You make something, they accept it. Did they like my soup? And they like your soup? That's a form of accepting you, because you tie yourself into your soup, your work, okay? Somebody comes along and they comment about how great something you did, it makes you feel good. And because that's a form of accepting you as a result of something you've done. And I understand that. That's good to do that. And so, when I was doing pastoral counseling, I realized I was dealing with different people. And what I mean by that is that, you've heard me say this before probably, is that a person will come in and they're projecting themselves to be somebody who they're really not. Now, many of us are smart enough to know that when we meet people, we don't really see the real person. We don't really know that person, because that person sometimes keeps that life, they keep themselves submerged, and you don't never get to see that person in reality, because they're projecting themselves to be somebody. And so you don't know if they're driving that car for whatever, or doing whatever, trying to show that they've arrived by the car they drive. Well, by the way, what is the number one car that multimillionaires drive here in America? Oh, it's a Toyota Highlander. Okay, so I didn't know that when I bought mine, but anyway, that's the number one car. They're not trying to prove anything. People who have wealth are not trying to prove anything. Just like somebody who knows martial arts, they're not trying to prove, I know how to hurt you, bud. I know how to defend myself. They don't try to show that off. And so, but people who don't have that, and they have the rejection, they're projecting themselves to be somebody. And then they're the person who they think they are. In other words, that self-image. And sometimes that self-image can be pretty small because of the rejection in their life. And it starts in their childhood. It starts with the way you love your children. If you love your children and you accept your children, if they make B's, you go in, you sit down, you discuss that, you love your children. There's a way around that without making them feel inferior, instead of making them feel like they're, somehow or another they don't match up to something. And so it's a way of doing that. And so with children, it's so important to love children. Children love to be loved. I think God made animals just for the fact of children. And children love animals, and animals love children. My German Shepherds, which are, they can stand at the gate and block anybody from coming inside my property, except for children. Okay, children. Oh, it's a child. It's a children. They'll let children right through the gate. Okay. I mean, I don't know if it's, I don't know if it was a midget or something, or somebody small person. I don't think that's the right terminology today, but a small person could probably slip through and get in thinking that they were children. I don't know. They're pretty perceptive, okay? They can stop adults, but children, it's like, oh, it's a child. Somebody that'll play with me, somebody that'll love me. Because children instantly love dogs. They love cats. And, I believe God created them to be able to show children love. I mean, animals love children unconditionally. That's the amazing part about animals. And the same thing with children. Children love animals. They love them just naturally, instinctively. And so children need to be loved. They need to be accepted. They need to be told how bright they are. They need to be told. You say, well, I don't want to give them any false hope. You can't clean somebody with dirty water. Basically, if you want your children to arise to better standard, you need to, tell them how good they are. Tell them how bright they are. Tell them that they're going to succeed. My mom used to sit there, and I remember one time sitting there, she was sewing clothes and making something, and she said, you said you could become a doctor if you really wanted to. You could become. She's filling my head with this stuff. Okay, and I was dyslexic. Okay, which meant I had really problems with spelling. Okay, comprehension. I aced that. Okay, I have a tremendous comprehension and memory recall. Okay, so God bless me with a great memory recall and comprehension. Those two things are, get you far in life, okay? And then she was telling me this kind of things. Well, I ended up with a doctor of divinity, but not a medical doctor. Now, she was talking about being a medical doctor, and I probably would have made a good surgeon. I probably would have done that, except for having dyslexic. I had a hard time spelling, okay? I mean, I believe God has healed me of that, and so we move on towards those areas. But she encouraged me, and my grades were not even that good. And I never had her one time ever criticize my grades. My mom worked with me. And so I think it's important to be able to love your children, accept your children. Try accepting people. Try to compliment them on something that they do. If they do something good, women do this all the time. Women, they tell each other how beautiful they are. They tell each other how great their hair looks. Now, us guys, we don't do that, okay? We don't walk up to Bud and say, hey, Bud, I like your hair, okay? We just don't come off that way, okay? Us guys just, we might give each other a fist bump like that or something like that, but we don't go too far. We don't tell each other how good we look or whatever. But women do that all the time, and it's important for the acceptance of that, and especially with children. It's so important to tell your children how much you love them. And if you don't do that, then you're going to end up causing them to go towards rebellious states. And then you've seen kids with spiked hair, purple, green, and yellow, and they got all the jewelry on their face. All they're trying to do is look for acceptance. You show me somebody that is in that area, it's rebellion looking for acceptance. And if they find somebody to accept them, which is Jesus, Jesus will always accept you. And that's what amazing is. People have a turnaround experience once they realize Jesus has accepted them. But anybody accepts them, they'll go with that person, regardless who they are. They'll go right off and follow a bunch of crazy people because somebody crazy will accept them. And so if you don't accept them, somebody will. And so it's important to accept your children for who they are. And they might not be the sharpest pencil in the box. They might have some mental prowess that might not be as great as it should be. Their mental development maybe is not there the way it should be. That's okay. Not everybody's cut out for college. Not everybody's cut out to do this. You learn to work with people where they are. That's one thing that I found that God does with us. He works with us where we are, and that's important for us to work with people, especially our children, with where they are. I have grandchildren, some, have graduated in college, and I admire that, and I have other ones who, they don't know what they're grown, but they don't know what they want to do yet, okay? So, but it comes by acceptance about that again. So the rejection is it causes a heart full of pain, and that pain again comes about from the heart, because Proverbs 4:23 says that the issues of life come from the heart. And that's where you hear me talk about where I got snake bit, okay, and when I was 14 years old with a copperhead. Well, it caused me to have this innate fear, caused me to have this fear of snakes. I mean, I'd be around guys, they wanted to milk rattlesnakes. You get that rattlesnake next to me, and I will cut you with the snake, okay? You do. I don't want nothing to do with the area of the snake, okay? And then I had a fear of heights. And I remember as a child dreaming that I could fly. I can remember I don't know if Charlene remembers this or not, but I remember dreaming that I could fly, and I thought if I could get on the barn, I was telling Mom, if I could get on the barn, I think I could fly. I think the devil's trying to kill me, okay? Because and to this day, I still remember flying as a child. I flew around the bottom part of our house, and I flew down over the driveway and flew right back up to the porch, okay? And I think it was the devil trying to kill me because I kept thinking, I think I can fly. And so Mom and them would scare me, take me to the edge of the porch and say, there's the height right there, and like, especially Dad, like scare me from pushing me off the edge of the porch. Well, then when I can remember being in Alaska with a bunch of Army guys up there, and then, these guys were the National Guard guys. They were training off of these 300-foot glaciers. And I remember rappelling off those glaciers, and I could go down that glacier. I might have to vomit first before I went down, but I could do it. I could override how I felt, but I had the fear of heights, and I couldn't. It was hard to get over it. Don and I was in Hawaii, and was in Oahu there down at Honolulu, and we were in one of those real high rises, only like 30-some floors. And Donna could walk right out on the balcony. Not me. I had to crawl out on the edge of that balcony and look down. Okay. That's coming from inside of us, okay? That's the place where the snake bit comes from. That's where critical words come from. So if you have a spouse and they say something to you that is critical, your heart picks up on that. Your heart. I've had women tell me, I love him, but I can't stand to be in the same room with him. And he had never physically done anything to her except verbally abuse. And verbal abuse is just as real as physical abuse. If I pinch your arm right here, if I find here in front of the video, if I pinch your arm right here, you would have pain. Well, your emotions have pain, and you can feel pain in your emotions, and that's the worst kind of pain because somebody has said something to you to hurt you. Now, children can do that to their parents. And parents are more receptive to it than children because children don't know no better, but children can say things to parents. You can say things to individuals, and you can cause great emotional pain. And then that self-protective mechanism one day kicks in and says, that person is a snake. That person is dangerous. And you don't even think of it on a conscious level. You just wake up one day and it's like, hey, I don't want to be around that person again because that person and you don't even know why, but it was because they brought pain to you. And that's why it's important to make sure that you don't damage your children by that snake bit, by bringing that pain to them on the inside, because they'll reach a place one day to where their rebellion or whatever primarily is protecting themselves from you to a certain point, because that's what happens in relationships. I mean, relationships go along, and it looks like the marriage is solid, everything is okay, but one is, verbally abusing, and verbal abuse is just as painful as physical abuse. So it's important then to watch your words. That's why I tell people you never say what you think. When you feel like saying something, that's when you better shut up. That's when you better hold your temper and don't say it. And it was like this. I remember I was counseling a guy when I worked in the sawmill, and I didn't even know I was counseling him, but that was what I was doing. He comes along and he said he had some marital problems. And he wanted to know if I had any, success at all. Now, Donna and I will be celebrating 55 years of marriage this year, so we know a little bit about marriage, and I knew a little bit about marriage then. And he said, well, could you help me? And I said, as a Christian, could you help me? And I said, sure, I can help you. Well, is there going to be a bunch of Bible thumping stuff? I said, no, not at all. I can give you some wisdom here. It's from God's Word, but I can give you some wisdom. And he said, what would that be? I said, when you're talking to your wife, when you first started going with her, you listened to her. You listened to what she had to say. You heard everything. She wanted to talk about something, wanted to see something. You went out of your way to make sure she'd see it, and she'd make sure that she would be able to speak her mind. And I said, now what happens when you get into a discussion? You start running your mouth, because I said, you do that with me, okay? You don't even let me finish, and you start running your mouth. And he said, well, what are you saying? I said, well, when you get back and you get into the relationship starting tonight, when you get home, if she starts saying something and doing things, don't say a word. I mean, because what will happen is she'll start to talk, and you'll hear a thought coming way down the road. It's going to thump down the road, okay, like a horse coming, okay? And you're going to hear that thought coming, and then when your thought gets closer, you're going to want to say something. And I said, you're going to shake, but if you'll just hang on, that thought will go on down the road and leave you. And so he said, well, I think I know what you're saying. I said, no. I said, you've got to be able to, you're going to hear that thought. You're going to want to say that thought. Just keep your mouth shut. See, you shouldn't be saying everything just because you feel like saying something. Well, I just speak my mind. I just tell people what I think. I know nobody likes to be around you either. So, it ends up creating strife, and nobody likes to be around a know-it-all. That person who's had rejection, now letting everybody know how much they know, trying to prove how much they know. So I said, have that thought. When it comes down the road, you're going to hear it. Thump-a-thump-thump. Going to shake and rattle. If you'll just hang on, it'll pass you on by. So a week went by. He stopped. He said, oh, my God, Tim. He said, I got to tell you, my marriage, my wife is going crazy about me. She thinks something has happened to me, okay? And he said, I'm following your advice. And he said, there's the times I'd hear that thought, thump down the road. I'd shake, want to say something, but I wouldn't say it. And I let the thought go on by. And he said, it's created a tremendous benefit of my marriage. He said, just that wisdom, I've been applying it. I said, now the danger is you'll forget what I told you, and then you'll start thumpity-thump thought will come down the road, and you'll go thumpity-thump out your mouth, and, you're going to end up in area of relationships. You got to be careful about that. So it's important to listen to people. It's important to hear what people have to say. And I'm telling you right now, it's amazing to hear what the stories that people have about their life. I mean, most people have an interesting life. I mean, they live from reason that they're doing what they're doing. So I just want to encourage you, if you would, to take the time. There's my niece, Tammy. I think about you. I'm so happy you're in a great relationship, going to church. And your mother was raised in a real Pentecostal church. I don't know if you know that or not. She was raised in I won't say what denomination, but she was raised, your mom, Tammy, Joan was raised in a real Pentecostal church. Her and I how come we got along very well. And Juanita, good to see you out of Klamath Falls, a great friend, an old friend of ours for a long time. When I say an old friend, I'm talking about a long-time friend, okay? We've all gotten a little older. I don't mean in age. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to watch our words, make sure we're not striking somebody like a snake, because that self-protective mechanism will kick in one day, and it'll turn on somebody. That's why people say, I'll never turn on anybody, I'll never do that. And then as soon as that person strikes you a few times, and without doing it or whatever, and really one of the ways that you hurt people is you mess with people. When we ran the company, okay, we ran a number of companies at one time. So my head manager was a retired executive out of Shell Oil. He was actually a vice president in one area of Shell Oil, okay, and the woman who I had run our production was a retired, ran the delis for Safeway for Northern California. Brilliant people. I hired smart, brilliant people. And so he would advise all of our supervisors, if you want to get along with Tim, stay away from the 4Ds, okay? Do not mess with the 4Ds, okay? Whatever you do, don't mess with them. And that was Donna, Daniel, the dogs, and my daughter, Darla. Don't mess with them, okay? You mess with the 4Ds, you'll get fired, okay? Leave his dogs alone, leave his family alone, and you'll get along great with him, okay? Okay. Hey, I just want to encourage you to do what's right. I just want to encourage you to love people, accept people where they are. Just take that. I mean, there's people right now that are hurting really bad that could use your love, that could use a kind word. I just want to encourage you to sow that, make them feel good. When I go through the checkout somewhere, I always am friendly. Hey, you got a beautiful smile today. Hey, and then before I leave, sometime I always say, Jesus loves you. I always throw that part in there too. Hey, I was glad to be with you. Thank you.